We are back for night two nights in a row, Chuck. We're making this a regular thing. Even though most people probably don't like watch this live or listen to it live, we both know this is two nights in a row, and it's kind of a big deal. Right? I mean, I'm excited about it. Last night was weird for me. Sort of, I've never shared what I shared last night publicly and all at once in sort of a long form conversation. It was cathartic. It was like therapy a little bit, I think. And
Without the bill?
it was what?
Without the bill.
Without the bill. Yes. Lord have mercy. I have spent a lot of money in therapy, which I didn't even get
Amen.
into last night, which is fine. But I got some really good feedback from our show last night. People have listened. People have watched some of the clips. Generally very positive. What about you? Have you heard anything?
You know, it's funny. And you have been in the conservative world. Like you and I kind of come from different worlds. A little bit, not
A
much,
little
but
bit.
like in a small town, right? From different worlds. In the conservative world. I had people reach out to me today and say, and they've said this before, so this wasn't new. But after hearing the story of what you went through last night, and this is funny because this just kind of talks about where we are in 2024. They're like, wow, Gabe is such a human, right? Just such an existence with such a story. Like we humanize people when you actually listen to them. That sometimes, when you disagree with someone about whatever particular issue it may be, you dehumanize them, right? It's almost the cool thing to do now is these people hate our country. These people want to change our way of life. These people are, whatever. It happens on both sides, right? Left and right.
Mm-hmm.
They are, they're fascist, they're communist, and neither party has any idea what they're even talking about when they say those words. But just the experience to hear something that every parent could, you know, empathize with and listen to a story, I think it is. I think it was very needed. I found myself. I told you this before we went live. I found myself being such a listener, which is not my normal role. Last night to your story, just flabbergasted. Number one, I had known a lot of the bits and pieces to it, but I'd never heard it chronologically. I thought it was very awesome and very important what you did. I was very impressed. I probably should have done a better job on my end, carrying more of the weight of the show that we did last night. But as far as someone who loves podcast and talk radio and hearing people's stories that are genuinely interesting and stories that are genuinely mind blowing, I found myself a huge fan of it.
Well, I think that's what we've lost, right? Like we've lost the humanity a lot of times in any kind of conversation we have. We look at people as issues rather than as people, or we look at
Yeah.
people as vehicles for issues rather than humans that have hard times or have things happen to them that are painful. Like we forget all of that and we ascribe a label to them, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, progressive, or whatever. I do it, right? I do it all the time. I think social media
Mm-hmm.
has a lot to do with that because you see somebody's thoughts that they post, but you don't really see them. You just see their thoughts, and then you form an opinion about them based on, a few lines of what they've typed on Facebook or a stupid meme they've shared that doesn't make any sense. Things like that. I do it all the time. Like I harshly judge people for some of the things they put on social media, and I'm sure people harshly judge me for the things that I've written, and it goes back and forth. But again, we lose the humanity in it, and
And it's a cop out too when we do
yeah,
that, isn't it? Isn't it so much easier to do it that way, to make your mind up? It's almost like when I was in school, and this will shock a lot of people. I wasn't a huge reader, and that's a trend I've carried out my entire adult life as well.
just stuck with it. You're consistent,
Like
Chuck.
Cliff Notes, right? I'd read the first chapter, the last chapter, skim through the middle, Cliff Notes, and then I got to where I got so good at just BSing the whole thing, I could literally, what do you call that? Like the outside of the book where you open it up and you can read like what the book's about. Not on the
Oh,
back, but I'm
the
talking
jacket
about.
cover, yeah, like the
Yeah,
like the
I could read the jacket cover and do a pretty damn good paper. And so, but I think that's what we do sometimes with people, right? You read the jacket cover, you read a headline, you have this preconceived notion, and then you think you're an expert enough to write a whole paper about it. And in reality, I never was. Now I could do it, I could bullshit my way through it, but that's all it kind of was. And it's the same thing when you don't really know somebody and you just have a lot of big hard opinions about them.
yeah. It's funny, and this is sort of to put a bow on this introduction. I wrote a piece for Tennessee Lookout this week, and it was about immigration. It's about a group of people that are associated with All Saints Anglican Church who have an immigration service that allows undocumented or unauthorized immigrants to find pathways to citizenship here. It's very needed. It's the only service of that kind in West Tennessee, in between Memphis and Nashville. It's a huge need around here. But the topic of immigration, especially in an election year, that is a great example of something that gets dehumanized. It is used as a narrative from one side or the other, right? You look at this collective like immigration, and from there, there's all sorts of fear mongering and stereotypes, whatever else you want to call it, when in reality, the immigrants and immigration are human beings who, for the most part, at least around here, have no idea what they're walking into until they get here. And when they get here, they're like, oh shit, this isn't what I was told this would be. I can't work. I can't get a driver's license. I don't have a social security. Like, what am I supposed to do? And now they're screwed. So it is an interesting balance in trying to figure out, okay, this is something I agree with. This is a person I don't agree with. Like, how can we find the middle ground there where they are a human? We disagree. Where's the middle ground to be okay with that? Like, I think we've lost that, but I hope that conversations like this, of course, you and I, we've known each other long enough to know we have things that we disagree about, but it doesn't affect the way that we see each other. So hopefully we can get more of that, you know, with as we bring guests on, as we interview people separately, things like that. But I want to hear your story. And I am much more comfortable on this end asking the questions than I was last night. Like you're a natural.
Yeah, like I think we're good to wrap it up if you want.
No. We are not going to wrap it up.
I like a bow on tonight's podcast.
I like asking questions. I don't like talking. I think you like talking. So this is going to be
yes, and asking and answering.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to just like be lobbing softballs, and I'm excited to see how far you hit them. So let's start from the beginning, okay? Because this is, you know, we don't need to get into Tennessee being last again in parenting time for fathers. We know that. I'm not going to show the graphic. I'm not going to show the map. But if you
they're 50th out of 50, 21.8% of the time with your child that you could receive fathers get, right? So about one out of 5 days is what most Tennessee fathers are looking at in the state of Tennessee. It does bear repeating. It's 50th out of 50.
50th out of 50. And I think when you say 1 out of 5 days, you know, for me, I saw my daughter every on the best case scenario until she moved here. I saw her every other weekend, which is kind of, I guess it balances out to once every 5 days, but it sure felt longer than that.
It's about, every other weekend is what 3 out. So here's what's standard in Tennessee now. And I did some checking before tonight. Usually every other weekend. Okay, so on a 14-day period, there's 3, and then a day on the week, you know, for dinner or whatever, a night maybe if you're lucky, that you wouldn't have your child. So that gets you to 4. And then sometimes you can talk your way up. And this is where mine started, to 5, which is, all right, so hypothetically, like every Wednesday, you would get your child, and then every other weekend. And that's pretty much about as much as you could hope for in many counties in Tennessee. Certainly in the county that you and I both went through a divorce in Madison County at the time with what we had. And my son was 8 when I got divorced. Now, my oldest son was 16 when it happened, and he came and lived with me immediately. Like, that wasn't necessarily the plan. It was, I was leaving and getting my stuff after, you know, lots of talk. You know, we did the thing like, hey, let's get through Christmas, leave after Christmas kind of deal. And, you know, was already sleeping upstairs in a room and stuff. And kids aren't stupid. They kind of knew what was going on. And, you know, it was said, hey, look, I'm sure you're going to go with your dad. And he looked at me and I looked at him. I was like, yeah, go get your stuff. And then so he was with me the whole time. And even throughout the divorce process and the custody process, he was never brought up to not be anywhere but with me, which was completely fine with me, but that wasn't like, there wasn't a big design for that to happen.
Let me ask you this. I'm already jumping in because thought, what was it like for you? Because you said you have two sons. One was 16 at
Mm-hmm.
the time. How old was your youngest son at the time?
8.
What was it like to take one son with you, but leave the other one? I don't say leave behind. You're not leaving him behind, but your 16-year-old went with you, but your 8-year-old stayed. Like, was that difficult? Was it easier taking, like, at least you had one, or was it harder?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think only with my story, it's so unique. And this costs me. We kind of kidded about therapy earlier. Cost me thousands and thousands upon therapy dollars, and will probably continue to cost me therapy dollars just for fine tuning every so often. And I was a guy that grew up and thought therapy was just for people out west, sissy men, liberals, beta males. That's what I thought, right? But I grew up, and my mom was a victim of rape when she was very, very young, and had told her family and small community, tight knit church, kind of out in the country, the whole story, right? Just, start filling in the stereotypes. So she left very young. She never had a normal relationship. She was married many, many times, many times, had a lot of stepdads, you know, never had a normal relationship with anybody. So I didn't know how to have a relationship. Now at the time, it felt like I did, right? Like I knew I was, attracted to women and all of these things, and I wanted to be in a relationship. But there was my story is different than yours. There was so much like. If I could live my life like Benjamin Button's, man, the things I knew at 43 versus the things I knew at 20 were I, I don't know. I guess I'm saying this. My mom was married a lot. I didn't see my dad growing up. Didn't really get to know him until I was already 18 years old. It was a really weird thing. I had a lot of pent up anger because my dad just kind of, let me go when I was a kid, and didn't pay child support or any of that kind of stuff. Now, when I saw him at 18, he had all these excuses. But it was the same time my mom got really, really sick, and she lived in a nursing home for 4 years until she died. She died really young, really, really young, like before 50 young. And so then he was kind of the only parent. He kind of told me all this stuff, but in the back of my mind, I always resented him because in the town that I grew up in, we were the only county in Tennessee without a red light in the entire county. And most people came from 2-parent homes, big farming community, stuff like that. I mean, I would have, a different stepdad every couple of years. And I think number like 5 and 7 were the same guy. And he was a pretty good dude, but my mom would just, she had a hard time having relationships. And so I never had that stability. So I never wanted kids.
Mm.
And I think that's the most important thing I can say with this is I never, ever, ever had any plan to ever have kids because I knew even when I was young, I probably wouldn't be a good dad because I didn't see a good dad for the most part. And I knew that my life was chaotic, like more chaotic than my friends. And so it's not something I ever wanted to do was to be a father. And when I met my ex-wife, she had a daughter who had a very involved father, very very good guy, and he got her close to half the time, and he was involved with her, but I was involved with her too. And the plan was, it's like, man, this is great here, right? Like I get to be a parent, but not to ever to not have a child that is my own. Even though I looked at her that way, I didn't legally speaking she was not. And so my first son was a complete accident. He's 21 years old, dirt ass poor, 21 years old. Uh, I mean, he was literally born just a few months after I could drink legally. And so I was scared to death. And we were very, very close. Now, with my youngest son, my ex-wife had her tubes tied. And we, paid the money to have him untied. Like he was a planned baby. So the two
Oh,
were very, yeah,
yeah.
the two were very different, and I was always extremely close to Will, like really close. But Knox was younger, and Will was very active in sports and things like that, and so we were together his whole life. And it's not that I wasn't with Knox, but he and I were always so close. So when I left, to answer your question, I know it was a long way to get to it, but to answer your question, I kind of thought, okay, because we had talked about this a little bit before we went through the whole dramatic thing of packing up and leaving. And by packing up for me, it was clothes, a couple of sports things for the kids, things like that, but nothing of consequence. No furniture. Uh, I did take a leather chair, so that's not true. A leather chair, that was it though. But mostly just stuff that was mine, golf clubs, things like that. So packing up, when he said, "I'm sure you're going to go with your dad." I was like, "Yeah, come on, everything will be fine." He came with me, and I told my youngest son, I was like, "Hey, I want to see you in 2 days. We get everything set up in the new house." And we'd kind of had the talk. We'd set them down and had the talk before, but it was weird. It was really weird that first night without him, and with Will there, my oldest son there. And we talked about this last night, but I think it's important to say again, and this is something I've learned in therapy and I've talked to with other people. Like, the one thing I didn't know is divorce is a death. It is a death. It is an end of something.
Sure.
And I did not understand it at the time. Like, I knew how hard it was, and I had an idea of what I thought how hard it was going to be, like this struggle going forward to go through the process. But I had no idea what a toll it was going to take on me personally. The fighting, the losing, because I thought, I was like, hey, I'm going to be happier. She's going to be happier. And at the end of the day, we both are. But man, the stuff that we had to go through to get there was awful. So to answer your question, I don't know. I guess it was better because Will was there. But at the same time, it still felt really empty too.
Yeah.
But man, okay. it felt different all the time. I don't know how to best answer that.
There was a time, not to make this about me, but to echo what you're saying about divorce being like a death. Look, I was miserable in my marriage, and after my ex-wife and daughter had moved to Texas, they had been gone for about 3 months. I was sitting in a bar. It's a Saturday night. And the only thing I could think about was, I wish I was back at home and we were getting ready to put Jordan down for bed and go to bed ourselves so we could go to Sunday school the next morning. Now, for years I'd hated that. Like, I hated it. But when it was over, I was just sitting and I was like, what? Everything that I'm used to is gone. And it's just this
breaking of a routine is hard.
Right. So I've got 2 questions for you, though. Follow up. One, just a short answer will do, and then the next one, it might catch you off guard. You might need a little time to answer it. First one is this, and it's probably obvious, but I wanted to ask you: how much easier would your divorce have been had you not had kids?
Oh, I mean, a million times easier.
I know you would have been sad, probably, because it's a breaking of a routine. But
yeah. I mean, I don't want to negate divorces for people that don't have kids. I know that's very traumatic. For me, though, the only thing, and when I told my attorney, was, this has to, however this works out, it has to end with me having Knox 7 out of 14 days. I would have fought, obviously, probably for different things, right? Maybe some more money, some more stuff, some more, equitable division of things that didn't matter to me when kids are involved. So maybe the fight looks different, but nothing but that was ever a really big concern for me. Other than that.
All right, here's a hard question.
Okay.
People say, I've heard people say, oh, as soon as my child was born, my life changed, right? Like, as soon as I saw that baby, everything changed. For me, that didn't happen. I had a baby, and I was like, this is a baby. It doesn't talk to me. I can't talk to it. I mean, I can. It doesn't understand anything I'm saying. We just got to, take care of it until it can do some things on its own in, a couple years. So I don't want to say my love for my child grew as she grew, because I always loved her, obviously, but my connection with her grew as she grew. So when your kids were born, what was that like for you? Was it that were you one of those people where this was immediate, your life changed because I've never felt a love like this ever? Or did it have to grow and evolve as the child grew and evolved?
So it's an interesting question. With Will, my oldest son, who's 21. He's almost 22 now. It was immediate. I never wanted kids. I had a son. It was immediate. The connection with him. At that time, I was working, I think, 3 jobs at a time. I worked 7 days a week for the first 6 months of his life. We were poor, and did a lot of different things. Worked at a Wendy's, worked at a Sears, worked at a pest control company to keep the lights on and stuff. But I can remember I was a shift leader at Wendy's, and I would get home at 1:32 in the morning, and I'd rock him, and I'd sing Glycerine. Right, that was the whole thing. That was like kind of our thing. And I don't know why. I probably could have picked a better song, but like to us, it's super special. And that's what I would do, and I'd feed him his bottle, and I felt like I missed out on the whole day. But there I was from like 2 to and I'd have to go to sleep around 4 because I'd get up at 6:30, go back to work, and so it was an immediate connection with him. It is different. Like I would be lying to say it was the same with Knox. I was in a different point of life, right? I had some things then. Like I wasn't working as much. I mean, I was working, but not 3 jobs, right? And so you love him. It was a different relationship with Knox. And I will say this, if I'm being honest, even in the divorce, right? Will came with me, and I got Knox half the time. The way we did it and still do it is one week I would have Monday, Tuesday. My ex, even while we were waiting for the divorce to go through and all the fights that come with that, she would have Wednesday, Thursday, then I'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then the next week, she'd have Monday, Tuesday, I'd have Wednesday, Thursday, she'd have Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's how we've done it the whole time.
Right.
Has been that way. And so it was when I left, I remember telling myself, I was like, well, I'm going to wait till Will is old enough. And it's not that Knox wasn't a thought. It's just, man, there was so many years between them, 8.5 years between them. I was like, man, I can't wait another 8.5 years. And if my ex was on here, she would say the same thing. Like we were miserable for years. The last, probably 4 to 5 years we were together were miserable. The worst thing is we quit fighting. And that was, 10 times worse than even the fighting. And so I couldn't do it, but I was worried about that. But in my head, like these games we play with ourselves sometimes as men, probably sometimes as people, I was like, well, Will is, at least old enough, and he at least understood. So I don't know. It's not that I didn't value them the same, but the relationship was so different between Will and Knox. And when it came down to everything that I gave up to get him half of the time, that really impacted Will, really impacted my oldest son too, and his, what he was able to do for college and go places and things like that. So the two were so intertwined. I don't know. I've never thought about it that way. I've always thought about it as a package deal, but as I'm kind of playing it out in my head, not to ramble, but as I'm playing it out in my head, it was, two different juggles. And man, going through it at the time, I didn't realize what all the fallout would be.
Well, let's see. If Will was 16, he's 8 years older than Knox. By the time your youngest son was born, um, you were 29, right? So you were approaching 30 and probably
Yeah, I was 30. Yeah, I was 30 when Knox was born.
30.
Yeah, versus 20 when 21 when Will was born. So about 8.5 years difference
21 and
between the
working
two
three
of them.
jobs versus 29 and probably just working one job at that point. I think
Yeah.
desperation probably, I don't know, like not added to that connection or whatever, but when you're just like scratching and clawing just to make this, like just to live. And I'm sure that heightened whatever emotions were being felt as well, and like that immediate connection was evident and it carried through. But now I want to kind of get into the family law side of this because
Hmm.
this is what this is about. As hard as it is to talk about, did you have any idea before the legal process started, that it was going to be so complicated and expensive? And like, did you have any inkling of an idea that this is the way this was going to go?
None. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard. I think one of the things that's so ridiculous is, you go to a mediation, you have these lawyers, you have all this stuff, and you kind of expect two people who are obviously in an adversarial relationship to work things out, right? It's kind of tough. There were some deals early on that looking back on, I 1000% should have taken. It would have saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, so mistakes were made on my part, but it just at the time it didn't feel, fair. My divorce was unique because COVID also hit during the
Oh,
middle of it. So it got extended out like 10 months. So there's 10 more months of waiting on a judge, of waiting on mediation, of waiting on
oh.
depositions. It was. And then so you've got a whole lot more time to be pissed off and to piss off the other party, right? Both ways. So
So
there
were
were
y'all trying to just
lots
make?
of things that happened in that timeline that just made, and that was obviously a unique time in our country's history. But that really extended it out almost another year.
So were y'all just trying to manage this between yourselves, like, or did you have like a tentative
I,
working parenting plan?
we had a working parenting plan that was, from the best I can remember, not put on paper and neatly. It was essentially like when I left, and we agreed I'd wait till after Christmas and all of those things that you do. When I left, I would have him on that schedule, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a swap schedule, right? Where I had him 7 out of 14 days. That was always the big negotiation for me to do this. I don't know. Maybe I'm trying to think back because we had papers written 2 or 3 different times because we both swapped attorneys during this 10, 11th month process. So I can't remember with accuracy. I think there was maybe something maybe written out maybe that second time because there was some contentiousness that happened. And I can remember, Max saying, hey, you're not going to say. I was like, oh yeah, no, this isn't going to work. Like we're going to do this. We're going to go to court. I'm going to come pick him up. Right? We have a standard here, precedent essentially that we've set, and so that ended up working out. I do feel like at some point we did get something on paper, like a temporary parenting plan. I feel like I'm right about that. I don't know that ever got signed by both parties. Maybe it did.
Where did you, when the process started in your mind, what were you wanting? What was your perfect scenario for you? And it may not be the
Mm-hmm.
perfect one for both you and your ex-wife, but for
Yeah.
you, when you set out in this legal process, the first time you met with your lawyer, at least I assume this is what happened because this is what I did with my lawyers, like all three of them. I said, this is what I want. These are my non negotiables. Okay. There are some things I can
Mm-hmm.
bend on, but here are the things that I'm not bending on A, B, C. What were the
Right.
things going into this that you were like, this is what I am not bending on? These are my non negotiables.
With my lawyer, my first attorney, who's a good friend of mine, and looking back on it, probably should have stayed with him. He just wasn't a family lawyer all the time, and I probably took some bad advice moving to a family lawyer. Um, there was some. I was like, hey, I feel like this is fair. I don't think this is fair. I think this. There was more. There was some that financial part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the overarching thing was always, I'm going to get Knox 7 out of 14 days, have to. And then when I made my lawyer swap because we couldn't get everything worked out, and at that time my ex-wife also made a lawyer swap, and this is a spoiler alert, she swapped way better than I did. When she
No,
she
she
made her
did. I
lawyer,
know.
yeah, God, hindsight 2020 and all. But when she made her lawyer swap, then things really got contentious. And I think that is a problem with the system because the two attorneys that we swapped to, the person that I swapped to and the person that she swapped to, had a very great working relationship together. They do mediations together. They have a good working relationship, and we were nothing but more dug in at that point. And I do believe, looking back on this years later now, being remarried, her being remarried, I know at least my opinion is they knew two people were prepared to go to battle and to go to war, and they were making $400 an hour, and that is the systemic part of this that I have a huge problem with, because when you are at your most vulnerable, I was literally trying to think of how I could live in a world getting my son 5 out of 14 days, which sounds so close. I can remember my lawyer. His name was Tim. He came up to me. He's like, Chuck, got this thing worked out 6 out of 14 days. Let's go ahead and sign it. It's going to be good for you. Could have saved me thousands, Gabe. When I tell you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every year. And this sounds silly, but again, I didn't grow up with a dad, and I didn't want to be a dad. But I knew more than that. The one thing I wasn't going to be was a shitty father, and I wasn't going to be an absent father. And I knew that the minute I looked at Will, almost 22 years ago now. I was like, man, there won't be a day I'm not there. And when it was Knox, and I was thinking about it, he was 8. He's 8 still, right? Getting closer to 9. And I told him, I said, that's 2 days a month. It didn't sound like a lot. But that's 24 days a year. It's getting close to a month. That's 10 years. That's 240 days. I said, even though 6 is better than 5, I said, that's still, it's almost a year of my son's life I'm missing out on when I want to be there, when I'm a good dad. I don't miss practices. I don't miss games. I don't miss, that BS where they dress up like pilgrims and Indians with cardboard hats. Like I don't miss that. I don't miss anything. I'm there 100% of the time. Go to doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, all of the stuff. I'm there. I'm present. I was like, it's not right. And I mean, every turn I took to get to that 7th day cost me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars up front and longevity wise. The length of it.
So for people who haven't been through this, and Jesus, like I hope we both hope nobody has to go
Ever.
through it.
Ever.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's not great. For people who haven't been through this, the normal process for family law goes like this. At least it did for me, and I'm going to see if it went like this for you. Somebody files for divorce. Which did you file or did she file? Not that it matters. I'm just curious.
I did file.
You did. See, I even though I was the one who fucked up, I was not going to file. And it's not that I didn't want one. I just was like so guilty about everything. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So she did it. I don't know that ends up making a difference in anything, but somebody's got to file. So once someone files and there are kids, then you start to work out sort of how are you going to split the time, and lawyers essentially communicate back and forth and try to get something worked out. If that doesn't get worked out, it goes to mediation, right? Now, did you have a deposition in there? Because
I had depositions. I've come to find out from other people that I talked to that this is uncommon. In instances, I had depositions before mediations. Now, maybe it's just the people that I talked to. Holy shit. Depositions were insane. In mediation, we were in different rooms. And when we sold our house, we were in different rooms. In depositions, it was my attorney and her attorney and a court reporter that I still feel like I probably need to apologize to. That lady does court reporting all day, and she's sitting there typing it up. And I mean, I saw 3 or 4 times her face going stark white. I mean, I don't get embarrassed normally. There were multiple times I was embarrassed about the things I was saying, and then also the things that were being said about me, and it was awful. I can't remember that sweet lady's name, but I do remember apologizing to her when she left when we finally got done.
Were you on your second lawyers? Did the second lawyers?
Yes, we were both on our second lawyers. We were on our battling lawyers at that point. I like to call them our warring lawyers.
I feel sorry for you because I know what your ex-wife's attorney would be like in a deposition because she was my attorney.
It was impressive. I would like to think I could hold on in most situations. That was intense. That was intense. And there was stuff after a 19-year marriage and relationship there, and I am a very flawed person, a very, 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 very flawed person, and would not want to at any point misrepresent that I didn't make a million mistakes in my marriage. None of those mistakes were being a father, though. Not one time, not one mistake, not with intent, at least. Obviously, I'm not a perfect parent, but you know what I'm saying, right? It was, and those are the things that you think about too, coming out in a courtroom and I own a small business. I mean, there are a lot of things that go on in your head. I wasn't doing radio work at the time, but always knew that I wanted to eventually. And I'm thinking, God, small town, here we go. I'm going to have to be, as mean as a snake too. And I'm going to have to air out all the dirty laundry, because my approach with this whole thing was, since I left, right, it kind of became a thing. My name was getting dragged through the mud. Had people call me, people who were acquaintances call me, wanting to know about it. And oh my gosh, I heard this. Are you okay? Like, everybody pretends to kind of care in the beginning, but what they really say is, "Oh, can I get to the juicy details?" So I never commented on it, which is unlike me, right? Someone with big opinions and gets paid for those sometimes. I didn't
Every
do
now
it.
and then.
Every now and again,
And they're funny.
I didn't do it. I didn't. I literally said, "Okay, look, everybody's going to be in the mud, or I'm going to be, at least my name's going to be in the mud. How many people do I bring with me, or did I just shut up about it?" And I chose to shut up about it for over a year, and it was so hard for me to do that. But those are the things that you're thinking of when you consider everything, right? I'd move my son from one private school to another at that time, and that was a whole kind of new dynamic for him, and started dating again. I mean, just all of these things that were happening, and I chose to stay silent on it. But I was like, man, here we go. These things could become in a public arena, and both attorneys were ready to go after as much blood as possible. And yes, the attorney who asked me questions in her deposition, she was very good and very tough, and that was your attorney the third time. But my attorney did a good job too, right? There's again, long-term relationship, there is going to be dirt there on both sides. And so I thought, man, how bad, that came into my mind too, is like, how bad and how public do you want this to get?
At this point, had you guys gone through mediation before the deposition, or
No, deposition first.
deposition first? Okay,
Then we
so
went to mediation.
all right, so let's jump to mediation. So, and by the way, let's just let everybody know too. You're paying your lawyer by the hour, right? So they'll
Mhm.
bill you for like I can remember, it's like I forgot how much a 15-minute email cost. It was like $100, like something
Yeah,
crazy like
it's
that.
really impressive.
15 minutes to send an email, bill you, here's $100. I'm like, shit. Like, I can remember, and I don't know if you were like this. I had so many things that I needed to email my attorney, but I would just hold on
Mhm.
to them so I could just email them all at once.
Yeah,
Because I made the mistake of emailing like them separately, and she would respond separately, and then I would get a bill, and I'm like, shit. Okay, I should have
and
just like collected all those for one email and sent it. But that's another issue with this, because again, maybe this is where we bring politics into it a little bit. It's a free market system, right? It's capitalism at its worst. People can charge whatever the hell they want to charge for stuff. But when you are trying to get the most important thing, your child, you're going to end up paying whatever you have to in the moment, because no reasonable person is going to say, because I want to go back to this. You said you could have saved yourself thousands and thousands of dollars if you just been like, okay, I'll take 6 days instead of 7, or 4 instead of 5, whatever it was, just
yeah,
for a day.
six. Yeah, it was going to be 5 in the beginning, and
Okay.
then before we got to the mediation, could have gotten up to 6. Would have been a better deal financially for me. But it still wasn't going to be the time over the course of 10 years. It was still going to be 240 days that I was going to be down, that I was going to lose. And that doesn't feel right to me.
No. How much money did you spend total, overall, the whole thing?
Between all of it, paying the mediators, paying for the depositions, paying attorneys, both sets of attorneys, 20 some odd thousand
Oh
in
my
legal
God.
fees. Yeah.
That's the thing, right? We pay our lawyers, obviously, for the work they do. But then if there's a deposition, then you've got to pay. The court reporter's got to get paid. The
Right.
time that the lawyer spends there preparing for the deposition and doing the deposition, they got to get paid. Then you have mediation. You got to pay a third fucking attorney to come and mediate the shit. So you're paying
Yeah.
you're paying your
Yeah. I got
lawyer,
to
but
pay
then
for
you're
all of that. That
splitting
was
the cost
1100.
of the mediation. All right, so y'all go to
It,
mediation.
yeah.
Where was the discrepancy? That's kind of what I want to know, because this is
Sure.
where, like, you see, and I don't know your ex-wife, and I try my best not to like drag my ex-wife through the mud last night, but
Mm-hmm.
it points in custody issues. It seems like the smallest issue can just hang up the whole thing. So where were y'all hung up? Like what was preventing you from?
There were a couple of things. At one point, we got up. My attorney and I got up, and we walked outside. And I was like, "Cool, I'm going to get in my car," because I think there was like some kind of like lifetime alimony thing thrown out there.
Holy shit!
Um, yeah, and I was like, "Well, no, that can't. That's not going to work." And my attorney, actually, one of the few things he said is like, "No, this is complete bullshit. It's not going to happen. This guy doesn't make that kind of money. This is nuts." And he was very correct. I do not make that kind of money. Um, and so we got up, and I was walking to my car. He's like, "Hey, let's just wait a minute." I mean, looking back on it, it just looks like this big dramatic posturing thing to, everybody to kill some time. But we ended up going back in, and that came off the table for a little bit. Uh, Here's what sucked. We went back to the drawing board, and this is the gamesmanship. And I have bought businesses before, and I have sold businesses before. So I understand, not to get Trump on you here, but the art of a deal, right? I
Trump don't
get
know
that.
what the fucking art of the deal is.
He wrote a book. He wrote a
Yeah.
book. But I understand what that is in the business world. But and maybe this is my naivete, but like this seems to be so much more important than that. This doesn't seem to be, it didn't feel like it should have ever been a business transaction. Um, because every time the dollar amount would go up precipitously from the dollars that I had, the day count could go up. And we were in depositions from 9 o'clock until 2:45. I'm sorry, excuse me, mediation from 9 o'clock in the morning to 2:45. Almost 6 hours of straight depositions, no lunch, no anything. Intense as hell. And I ended up leaving with 100% of the debt over 19 years. I lost everything I had worked for, and any money I had saved and stuff like that. And so it was really, really tough to get to that seventh day, that 7 out of 14 days. And who I'm most angry at with that, you would think, well, maybe the lawyer, maybe your lawyer, maybe the ex-wife. It's none of those people. Who I am most angry at are two people. Number one, legislators who are men in almost every single state. And I understand most of them hadn't been through a divorce. I sure as hell didn't understand what divorce was until I went through one. But I'm mad at them because I spoke to a lawyer friend of mine today and asked him, I was like, am I right with my thinking here that these legislators could change this? They can make it where there's not so much variance in every county, where you could say, look, if both parents want to be involved, they should be, unless there's extenuating circumstances. He's like, yeah, absolutely they could. And there shouldn't be variance depending on the chancellor. There really shouldn't. There just is. Well, that doesn't fly with me anymore. I fired off an email before we did this podcast to both my state representative and my state senator. And I fired off an email to Governor Bill Lee. I don't care if it does I don't care if it does any good or not. Somebody's got to open the door. So that's the first group of people I'm upset with, because they do have the power to create the change, and we use it on a bunch of culture war bullshit. The second thing I'm upset with, and more so than anything else, is I'm upset with every single father out there. I'm upset with my father. I'm upset with every single father. Doesn't even have to be a husband, because there's lots and lots of fathers that were never married, right? From one night stands to never married to everything in between. I'm upset with them because you have laid the groundwork for people to make it really easy for Tennessee to be 50th out of 50 when it comes to seeing your kid half of the time. You have created an uphill battle for men and fathers who want to do the right thing. We're having to climb over bodies to
Mm-hmm.
get to the top, to do the right thing. You did. I did. And that is where, if there were more than two people tonight doing podcast and talks about this, 4 days before podcast, this would make a difference. If there were more people with a bigger voice talking about these things, it would make a difference. Men have become so complacent in this arena of not demanding this. And I'm not saying just saying it, because I can give you tons of examples, and you can too, and any females out there listening can give us examples of, oh well, this guy fought for 6 out of 14 days and he didn't even use them. Hey, go get his ass. Go family court. Go get his ass. Find him. Make him pay it. Make him pay the mother's legal fees. Do all of that. Do all of that. But what you can't do is make it harder for the parents who do want to be involved for whatever reason. That's ridiculously not fair. A father could never do everything a mother does, but a mother could also never do anything a father does. And we have all these lines when we talk about crime and youth statistics and stuff, and we always say two words all the time. I hear it every day: fatherless homes. And I grew up in one. Fatherless homes, fatherless homes, fatherless homes. Well, man, 55%, the answer is to stay married, right, and never get divorced. That's perfect. That's a perfect scenario. And I think that's the best advice we could give. But when we know about 6 out of 10 marriages and divorce, and lots of those people have children, you're going to have to deal with this. Okay, so here's the mess. How do we clean this up? And the fact that men are, there's not more of an outcry. And the fact that men knock these women up and then don't have lots to do with the kid after that, and all of the responsibility comes on women. All those things come into play when you look at things that I had to go through and things that you had to go through. All of those things, all those ingredients go into the cake, and it's totally wrong.
I want to ask you something. I want to back up probably about 15 minutes, because you said it quickly, but it was a huge thing. You essentially, the deal you made was, you, if I heard this right, you took on all the debt,
Mm-hmm.
alimony,
Yes.
whatever it was. You took that
Yeah,
on.
child support. Still child support, even because child support in Tennessee is based on a formula: your income versus the other person's income. That was based on a formula.
So you took all of that in exchange for that extra day. Is that right?
Right.
Did I hear that
Right.
right?
To get to 7. That is correct.
I don't want to get biblical here, Chuck, because I don't believe any of that shit. But this is what came to my mind, though, right? Like, there's this verse in Scripture, and I'm not comparing you to Jesus, okay? Like, I'm not a
That would
Donald.
be a good call to not do
Well,
that.
I'm no Donald Trump voter, okay? I don't compare regular humans to the Messiah. But what I heard, or what I thought of when you said that, is there's this verse in the Bible somewhere. It's like, greater love has no man than this, that he would lay down his life for blah, blah, blah. But that's what this is. It is saying, you give me all of the debt. You pile all of this on me. I'll pay it for the rest of my life. Whatever the financial loopholes are that can get you out of that, or get you whatever it is, I will do all of that. I will ruin my credit. I will do whatever I need to do to get one more day. One
Yeah.
more day. Now, those days
And
add
the
up.
thing
But
about it, then that's right. That's the point.
that's exactly what everybody should fucking do. Like, this shouldn't be, oh, well, you know what? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of debt. I'm going to give up a year of my kid's life. At what point do we, as fathers, like you said, come to the realization that it is a dual parenting responsibility, whether you're married, divorced, never married, in a partnership, whether you're two men in a partnership with a kid, or two women, or a man and a woman, whatever it is? When do we get to the point where we understand that two loving adults in the life of a child, as much as they can be, is the best thing for that child? We say we're pro-life in Tennessee, but I will be goddamned if we live that out all the time. And this is another instance, And I will say this, I don't think our legislatures are intentionally ignoring this. I just think it's a perfect example of ignorance because they've never had to deal with it. Or if they have, they've had connections high enough up that they didn't have to go through the shit that we went through.
Yes, I think that you were right to a large degree there. But even if they don't deal with it personally, right? Like I don't want them writing legislation on things that only affect them. Now, I know sometimes if you pay attention, it feels like they only write legislation about things that only affect them, but they know their constituency, right? More than half of marriages end in a divorce. And this is, I say something on my radio show all the time, right? More freedom equals more responsibility. And I really, really believe that, right? I think it is a fist fight to stay free and to have liberty. But that fist fight isn't to do whatever the hell you want to do. That fist fight is to be responsible. I really do think freedom and responsibility are synonymous. And I think it's the same thing with being a parent. You should have the freedom, the responsibility, the right to be in your child's life. And if you're not, there should be things in place. Like I think we do women a disservice all across the nation. I was having this discussion with my wife tonight before you and I came on, and I've really been talking about this all day since the podcast we did last night with your story. We've had a lot of interesting conversations today about it, and we really do expect. So, say I was never married and you were never married, right? And you met a girl and I met a girl, and we both got them pregnant, right? Maybe I dated this girl for a couple of months. Maybe it was just a one night stand with you. We could both walk away. Now we may have to pay money, right? Some child support, stuff like that. From a responsibility standpoint, we could walk away relatively scot-free. There's not a whole lot that makes you say you have to get that child half the time. There is not a lot. I mean, you have to pay again, which is, I mean, that should be bare minimum. But if a mother said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the club and leave my kid here by herself," well, then she goes to jail, right? That's child endangerment, child abandonment. Like that doesn't really exist in the man. Like, why are the expectations? Because I feel like what we're asking is a big ask, is the right ask. But I think if there aren't also adjustments on the opposite side, societally, if there are not the same adjustments, like there need to be more things in place to protect. And it doesn't have to be wives. It can be fathers and mothers. And those could be people that were married and divorced, or that could be people that just had a relationship for any amount of time. There has to be more equally distributed, more of an expectation for the father to be there. And I think if that were the society that we lived in, we wouldn't be having to climb over all of these bodies to get to where we both ultimately landed.
Yeah, we've got to do away with the tropes of gender roles in society. Like that's got to change. And I think what you just said, that's an example of one where the traditional view by men, by society, women are the caretakers. They're the ones who stay home. They're the ones who take care of the children. Men are the breadwinners. We go out, we hunt, we gather, we bring home money, food. It's been that way since the dawn of time, blah, blah, blah. And those gender roles have stuck. I referenced last night when we got lectured by Chancellor Butler in the courtroom, and he looked at me and he's like, you can't just be going down to Dallas whenever you want. You can't be just, hey, I want to go down and see my daughter this weekend, but next weekend you go out and party or something. He referenced something like that. It was his automatic assumption that that's just what I did because I was a man. And
Right.
that shit has to change because when you have gender roles that are that defined, and by the way, that false, you end up making shitty decisions as a judge.
Right. But
And
he was wrong with you, but statistically, if he would have said that 5 times that day, he'd have probably been right 4 of them, statistically.
maybe,
And
but
that's my contention. That's what has to be fixed. We have to expect more from these fathers out there. We have to. It has to be This is the measuring bar, and anything below it is failure, and failure cost. It costs something. It cost money. It cost freedom. It cost something. There has to be, if we are going to, I think as men, it's two white men, which just a handful more, and we could be state representatives, but it's two white men
Right.
together asking for this. I mean, there has to be an equal balance on the other side, because if we're being honest with each other, most men, unfortunately, are either okay with the status quo or underperform whatever their arrangements are. And that makes life harder for us.
I think sometimes too, I've sort of been, you're like me. I assume everybody's like this when it comes to social media. Like you'll follow things on social media, you'll never comment on them, you may not like them, but you'll just sort of see these patterns existing of these people that you know on social media. So I've got I would say a friend. I don't know if I would call him a friend or not. There's a connection I have on social media, and he's going through a divorce, and he's one of those people who's pretty public with these things that he posts. And
Mm,
you're reading between the lines because I've experienced going through the family law system. He's experiencing the things that you and I experience, and I'm just sort of watching this play out in real time over social media because he's flabbergasted at what an uphill battle this is. And
yeah.
it seems like in some of his posts that he's just ready to give up and be like, okay, I'll just do
Yeah.
this every other weekend, and I'll have to get a second job to pay child support, but also to, have time for my daughter. Uh, and I think sometimes the starting points in Tennessee with family law are so stacked against the dad that they give up pretty easily, especially if money's tight for them. Because shit, Chuck, you know more than I do how much money this costs if you're going to get just half the time. Like it costs you literally thousands and thousands of dollars just to get half the time.
Yeah. Oh, way more than thousand. I mean, yeah, but throw about
Tens
five
of
zeros.
thousands of dollars
It's
to get.
you could even add more. It's one of those deals where it's one of those deals though. And yes, I don't disagree with any of that. But I do think that we still have to, and look at me being like the bleeding heart on this one, but again, the majority of men are like my biological father. The majority of men will step out. Now, that's not true. Not even close to true. Let me back this
Back
up.
up.
There are enough men out there who have set this precedent of not doing what they were supposed to do, of not paying the child support, of not paying for the braces, of not showing up on the days they were supposed to have, that it has probably generated this concern for these judges. So I think, if we are to be fair, and I put this in the emails that I crafted today to my state representative, my state senator, and the governor of my state that I sent them. Now, to be fair, I didn't type out three different emails. I just copied and pasted them, but I did send them to
Real
three
quick, I have a
different.
question. Did
Yeah.
you draw pictures for Chris Todd? Because I don't know that he can
Well,
answer.
I left your phone number with any
Okay,
questions for
thank you.
him.
Continue.
Um, but when I ask them these things, when I sent the email, I addressed the male side of it too. And I told him, I said, as a man, as a father, I hear these stories. I have friends, people that I've known. I say friends, that's way too strong of a word. People that I've known that I consider to be shit parents. Um, I can be nice to them if I see them. There's no need to have a big fight with them. But man, I have no respect. I mean, that's literally how I gauge you. It's someone I want to be around and care about your opinion. Is, if you've had the opportunity to be a parent, are you a good one? And a lot of that probably goes back to my childhood, right?
Mhm.
And all of, the things that happened to me and the things that I experienced. It's like, man, it's too important of a job to not do 100%. But we know that there have been so many men out there that haven't. I think we have to increase whatever. When I was talking to my attorney friend before the podcast, he said, you got to bop them on the head. Whatever that bop on the head is for women or men, because I mean, we can find examples of women probably not using the time like they were supposed to, not helping like they, whatever it is, whatever person in the relationship is not doing that, there has to be something in place for them as well. So it can't just be, hey, let's start at 50-50. I think you have to look at the whole picture and say, why have we probably not historically started at 50-50? So I think if you're going to ask for one, you have to address what the counterpoint may be. And that's what I did today. And I think that's what I want to get across is this is, yes, saying with two willing parents who want to be part of their child's lives half of the time, that should be the hope. I mean, we should all be sad that a splitting is happening, be it a divorce, be it the relationship ending, be it whatever, be it that a child is going to be raised without both parents in the household every day. We can be sad for that, but that's the world we live in. Okay, so what's the next best thing now? All right, so now we've kind of dropped down a rung. Well, the best thing would be for both parents to have equal shared time, if possible. If there's abuse, if there's neglect, if there's all these things that could be happening, well, then you take it on a case by case basis. But there has to be something in place. If we start there and both parties say they want that, there has to be something in place for either party who doesn't hold up to their end of the bargain to hold them accountable and punish them accordingly.
I thought about this today a few times. You don't like this word. I used to use it a lot more than I use it now. I use it less because of a conversation that we had through text about a year ago.
Yeah.
The word is privilege, and I think that this is the one area where people like us, white men, we are probably the marginalized group in this. And this is probably the only area in social culture or whatever where that's the case. Normally, people like us, we make the rules, right? Like we're the ones that make the laws, make the rules. Throughout the history of this country, white men have had rights before anyone else.
Yeah.
This is the situation, though, where it's flipped. We are, at least in Tennessee, we are behind the 8 ball from the beginning. From the jump, we are starting out behind. Right?
I'm disagreeing with you here.
What? All right, hold on. Tell me why. Why are you disagreeing with this?
Right. Oh, no, that's not fair. I'll finish your thought first, and then I want to say it.
Because in this situation, we don't start even at all. We start behind. Our baseline is every other weekend, 1 day a week in Tennessee. That's the baseline. Where in other states, the baseline is 50-50. Here's our starting point. We go from there. Here, we start out behind the 8 ball. So we are the marginalized group in this context. We are the ones who are fighting the uphill battle and trying to be heard. Now, we've got people who don't reflect well on the male population in general. However, that's the worst kind of stereotype in the world, to take individuals and then apply their behavior to the mass audience. And that's what the legal system has done here. They've seen some men who haven't done what they're supposed to do, so they stereotype everybody with a penis the same way.
That part is true. Let me tell you what I disagree with, because you were talking about men being the marginalized people. I think this is men being weak as hell. I think that because I've heard men say in the Tennessee House, and I'm going to bet that they've said this in other state houses too, that women's role is to nurture. Women's role is to be home, to raise the family. Here's the umbrella: God, father, mother, children. Right? We you see it all the time. I talk about it all the time.
Those fucking umbrellas. Yes.
Yeah. My mom was not a perfect lady at all. At all. She had a million faults, and she had a very, very hard life. And she was very emotionally scarred from what happened to her starting at 12 years old. She did everything she could to fill both roles. She never did either perfectly, but she did everything she could for me to fill both roles. As a man, I don't accept. Now, I know I'm never going to be a female, right? There are going to be some things that I can't do. But I mean, man, when my kids are sick, when my kids are hurt, they were always just as comfortable with me as they were their mother. Like I don't shirk those responsibilities. There is nothing that I would not try to provide for my child. Now, again, I don't think one parent can be both parents. I would never ever say that. But I think that we have leaned in. And I don't think our legislators are as naive to this as it may appear to be. I think is it a much easier response to say, this is best for the child. The mother, because if I open up my Lee Greenwood Bible and I see the umbrella, it's God, Father, Mother, Child, right? God is the leader of everything. Father is the leader of the household, and whatever else it says. Mother's nurturer. It said that in there, and this really bothers me. Mother's nurturer and raises children. Children obey parents, right? So that is kind of the umbrella, and that's a weak way out when we know these things exist, like divorce. We know these things exist. We know children are involved out of wedlock. We know these things exist. So to have the power to do something and to not do it, I don't think that men are at a disadvantage here. I think it's more of a choice. I think it's a weak way out, saying, well, that's what women do, right? Women are better nurturers. So it's better for the child. It's impossible. It's better for the child to have as much involvement with both parents as possible.
So what you're saying is this, and look, now I will get on board with this argument now. What you are saying is our Tennessee state legislatures are, this is the worst example of patriarchy possible, because they assume not that men are just shitheels and won't do anything, but that a woman's place is to raise them kids. Like, is that what you're saying?
Well, and I'm not saying necessarily, stay home, don't let the women work. I'm saying that, yes, women are, and I've heard this forever, and women are amazing. Mothers are amazing. I was raised by a single mother. This is not a shot at mothers. This is a shot at men. To say, well, women are to nurture the kids and young kids need their mother. Well, of course they do. Why don't young kids need their father? Why don't we say that at the same damn clip too? Why are we so, because here's the thing. Like we don't let women walk closest to the street on the sidewalk, right? We don't let, until recently, we didn't let women go to war zones and things like that. Like there was all of these things that we would do when we would prop women up. Like, how do we get out of this as fathers? How do we get to be the ones who don't go to the war zone? How do we get to be the ones who don't stand between, the lady and the cars passing on the sidewalk? How do we get to dodge this parenthood by saying things that mothers are very important to a child's life? Yes, of course they are. Follow that up with fathers are important to a child's life.
Yeah, I feel like this can splinter into a lot of different streams of conversation. I think it goes back to the roles that we have assigned genders, and those things have to dissipate. At some point, we've got to recognize the equality between both sexes when it comes to raising kids. We've got to recognize the different skill sets that a mother and a father bring to raising a child. I think we have to recognize, well, hell, even the different skill sets of a mother and mother, or a father and father, because those are still two different people raising that child. When you have two loving parents, regardless of the gender, I think we have to figure out the strengths and weaknesses of that person based on themselves as a person, rather than a stereotype of whatever gender they are. And when we can get to that point, then maybe we can start to talk about equal time, navigating a system that is stacked right now against the father. And it is in Tennessee, regardless of the reasons. There are several reasons that we've outlined, and I think all of those reasons are legitimate. But the fact of the matter is, as of June the 11th, 2024, we're still fucking 50 out of 50 when it comes to time with the father. And that's a problem.
Yeah, 21.8%. You need to realize that if you're a parent out there, and I go differently than you on this a little bit. You're talking about gender roles and stuff, and yes, I think that you're saying we got to tear down some of the stereotypes, and I would say adjust expectations, right? Because I think that there are inherent differences between fathers and mothers. And I don't know, right, about households raised by two fathers or two mothers. Like, obviously that can exist and that can happen, and obviously they can still divorce too. I haven't even, I don't even know how to wrap my mind around. Like, that scenario seems so foreign to me. But that's pretty unfair, because obviously those things could happen and will happen. So I don't even know what quality looks like there. I mean, I don't know if that's worse, if that's easier or harder than going what you went through and I went through. I would have no idea. I guess it would just be new. I don't think there's a lot of precedent for that yet.
I think it would be easier. And I think the reason I say that, in a lot of ways, I think there are these things that are built into our subconscious that we just assume because society has told us this over and over and over again. Men are strong, women are nurturers, like just simple things. And when those things are already in place in our minds and our culture, then we tend to make decisions or lean one way or the other without even realizing we're leaning one way or the other. And there are inherent differences, obviously, in a man and a woman, clearly. I mean, a lot of the ways that men parent are different than the ways women parent, but still, in the end, a child that has two loving adults in their life is going to be better off, I would argue, than a child that doesn't. And
Agreed. 1,000%.
that's where we've got to get to. Like, our judges have to get to that point. Our legislators have to recognize that this is an issue, and hopefully your emails will at least like perk some antennas up there.
And can we? Yeah, I hope so too. I hope I'm not on the block list. Can we? And another thing we didn't address, because you're right, judges, legislators, really important. The majority of these things get handled in mediation. This is something I wanted to touch on tonight, and I didn't. That mediator role. Okay, the attorney you used and the attorney that was against me, she does a lot of mediations in this space. You are essentially the judge, because if you can mediate that out and you send that up to the judge, he's going to sign off on it. I'm going to imagine almost every time, right? Makes his job pretty damn easy. We got to live in a world where we see the dollar amount going up and the day count going up. That's got to be a problem. That makes custody for sale, not for the child. And I bet this has happened to more than one person out there. That's a problem. That's a problem when you are doing that role. And I can't even remember who the mediator was in my case, but it doesn't matter. Like, looking back on it, when you see something, when you're talking about a child, and I understand there, financial things are mediated as well. Like in mine, it's not just about the child, but like, that should raise an eyebrow. That should raise a suspicion. That should be okay, yeah, you need to go to a judge, because you have a big responsibility there. Like, the whole system just seems so broken. Like, if we had a business that was this broken for all parties, and broken for the employees, broken for the customers, if we had something that was in this bad of shape, we would at least look at adjusting it. And I think that's my biggest ask for these family law courts all over the U.S. is, in a lot of ways, these things are broken. Can we look at adjusting them? Can we look at finding pivots where we can to make them better for all the parties, and especially when you're talking things like custody for the child? Can we get there to an environment that's fair to the child and older children? I mean, there was a time, I lost a lot. My oldest son was very smart. He got a lot of academic money and got some athletic money, but was going to go to a school that, was still going to be, $10,000-15,000 a year. And I just didn't have at the time of divorce. It just happened. And because I'd lost all it, he didn't get it. He didn't get to go. Right. And that was tough for him. Right. He kind of lost on that. Now he's a smart kid and he's made pivots and he's going to be absolutely fine. But because of that, because I had given up everything to get one kid half of the time, I affected another kid's. It's almost like you're picking, right? You remember when I started this off and I said, man, I was so close to Will from the very beginning. And then that bond with Knox was different. But man, it's the same. And I mean, you do feel this tug of war. I remember the guilt I felt with that, like that constant tug of war. And I guess my bigger point is, like, mediators have a responsibility in this too, because they solve a large percentage of these. We got to hold them to the same standard we do legislators and judges, because it's not right.
It's not, and I will say this, in my experience in mediation, which mediation for me happened 3 different times,
Mm,
The
mm.
mediators in my mediations went into the mediations with the idea of, okay, we know what the judge is going to accept and not accept. So let's start here.
Yeah. Seems
So
like
in
I may
the end,
remember.
I do think it falls on the shoulders of the judges to sort of start communicating, at least to attorneys in family law court, that hey, we're going to do everything we can to get equal time, for that to be our starting point, and then we'll go from there. Because look, obviously, you and I, both of us, want to clearly communicate that just because you're a man doesn't mean you should get equal time. If you're a shitty person, if you're abusive
Right.
or anything like that, you don't need that time. Same
Yeah.
thing for
Or
women.
if you've been given that time and you're not using it, hey
Right.
man, you
Same thing.
lost it. We can't continue to put this on the women and expect it not to be exactly like it is now, right? There has to be more to get this more freedom, this more liberty. We have got to have more responsibility. We got to start holding up our end of the bargain.
Right. And I think the more conversations that we can have about it as men, the better it's going to be. And the more we can communicate with our legislators, the better it's going to be. Because I do believe this is something that should cross party lines no matter what. Because there are
Yeah.
Democratic men who have been screwed by this in Tennessee, and there are Republican men who have been screwed by this in Tennessee. This is an issue that literally can reach across the aisle and should have everybody on the same page. It should.
It's not partisan. It's
No.
kids.
Right.
And most of us live in states where we love and want to protect children, right? Because our politicians always say it. And so I mean this is what this looks like. But the biggest thing is this needs tweaking, right? This is a failing business right now, and we have to make some adjustments to the business.
Is there anything you wanna add about your situation, your personal situation, before we shut this down?
No, no, not necessarily the personal end of it. Um, I just want us to change our expectations for us as fathers, but then for us as society too, right? I think that if fathers were to do more, and I'm not talking about you and I'm not talking about me, like it's really hard for us to probably do much more than we do. I'm talking about just the standard of what we expect. We expect, all right, so play a game with me real quick. Kids in a park playing. Kid falls off the slide, scratches the knee. Who just ran up to wipe the knee off in your head? A mother, probably, right? That
Mm,
scenario. Like, it's just, I mean, it's
yes.
like things like that. Like,
Yeah.
I want us to change our, and maybe that's not the best
Well,
example,
that's
but
the
like,
subconscious bias. Like that's
yeah,
that's what society has taught us.
well, but that's also the existence that we've had as men too. Like, it's been
Yes.
really easy. Like, you understand how hard it is to deal with a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. Like, it's really hard. And so I think we've been really easy to let that part go for a while. And well,
Right.
here's the umbrella again, father, mother, child. Like, there's a lot of stuff because I want to let everyone in on a news flash. You work an 8-hour day. You're not working 8 straight hours, right? There's
Right.
off time in between it. I have stayed home with children before and they've been saying there is zero off time when they are 3 years old and 4 years. There's zero off time. Even naps, you have to then have the entire house silent because any noise will wake them up. So there's zero off time for them like that. So I would suggest to you it is a much harder job to do that. And I think sometimes as men we're really easy to let that go because that's really probably a lot harder than what we're actually doing when we're providing and doing those things.
Well, of course it is. But all a man's got to say is like, "Hey, God told me to tell you to change that diaper. So get in there, get that thing done." Look, I've wanted to have this conversation with you for a while because, again, like we said last night, like you and I have casually sort of referenced parts of each other's story to each other over the last year and a half, but we've never been given the space to tell it until
Yeah.
last night and tonight. And
Yeah.
they're not exactly the same, but there are enough similarities in both of
Yes.
these, and
Yeah, I would agree with that.
probably for any man who lives in Tennessee who is divorced or is a single father, a lot of what we're saying, they're probably like, "Oh shit, yeah, that happened to me too." So
Yeah.
these conversations have to keep happening. Father's Day coming up on Sunday can't just be a day where, you get your new grill or a new set of golf clubs or whatever. And, we move on throughout the day like it's nothing, because for a lot of men who don't see their kids every day, I don't know if Father's Day was like this for you. For a long time, man, Father's Day was such a huge day for me. Before Jordan lived here full time, it was like this kind of heavy emotional sort of day for me, because there was all of this pressure to like live up to, like, the time that we missed, or there was that acknowledgement of, hey, I don't see you every day, or I'm not here. Now, she was always, I've never spent a Father's Day apart from her ever.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really
Because she was always here during the summer, for that visitation before she moved up here full time. um, but we've got this Sunday, we've got to keep it at the forefront of our mind that there are a lot of dads out there who they may just be seeing their kid on that day for the only time in a span of 2 weeks or even a week. And
yeah.
that's hard. That's hard for the kid. That's hard for the dad. And shit, it's hard for the mom to have the kid that much. I mean, and again, we're not saying every dad should have equal 50-50 time. If they're not doing the things that they're supposed to do, they don't need it. But that's got to be the starting point. Has to be.
Yeah. If we want things to be better, we're going to have to do better. And I think that starts a lot of times with men and showing up and learning to do the things that may not be, as secondhand to us and as natural as us, but none of it's impossible. I know stories of men who've raised kids when something's awful happened to their partner, and they figured it out. They turned out to be amazing dads. I mean, there are all kinds of stories. Now, conversely, moms, I was raised by a woman. I know people could suggest, how good of a job she did, but she did as best as she could. Like, I mean, those things happen too. People overcome. There have been people who have done that, and we can do that too. But if we want things to be better, we're going to have to do better first. That's going to give us all a better leg to stand on.
Man, I enjoyed it. I don't know if it was hard for you sort of rehashing all this stuff. It was kind of weird for me rehashing all of it last night, but it's definitely worth telling. So,
What's amazing? And our YouTube stream was definitely working. Like, it was really, I got a little emotional at one point, but about 30 minutes ago, I got a text from my youngest son. It said, the podcast is going good. So he's watching live on YouTube. Well, there you go.
It.
It's at least working.
I was wondering who our one viewer was, and now I know.
Yeah, you know now.
Now I know. Oh, man, that's great. That's great. Well, look,
and he said it's mom, so I'm curious if it was playing in the background. That'll be fun.
Look, here's the thing. And then we will end on this. We have to keep having conversations, and we have to keep having conversations that are authentic and that don't pull any punches. Because if you don't tell the truth, nothing's ever going to progress. So that's got to be the first. And I think that's what you did tonight. That's what I did last night. And we'll roll from there. So well done, sir.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.
See y'all.